of the questions that you hear a lot of people ask in the gaming community is, what are the best games ever made? Personally, I feel that there's no definitive best. Something can always be topped, or has been, but nobody has taken the time to notice. However, I felt like giving my own 2 cents on what I view to be the best games I've ever played. However, I'm not going to view this in the same way as many others do. This is not a list of my favorite games. This is not based off of fun factor or nostalgia or even brand loyalty. This is me observing the game on a design standpoint and finding it artistically strong. So this is more so a top 10 artistic games list than a top 10 best games list. And when I say artistic, I don't mean a game that brings attention to its art direction and presentation instead of the actual gameplay. This is based on how well a game achieves a goal that it sets out for itself and how it uses everything at its disposal from different aspects of the gameplay to graphics and sound to achieve it. Some of these will be well-known classics, some will be criminally panned by the gaming community and critics, and others you've probably never even heard of. These are just my thoughts, and so if you disagree or have a game in mind that isn't on here, don't sweat it because I don't see this as a definitive list. These are, at this point in time, the top 10 artistically strong games I've played. Number 10. Let's start this countdown with one of the most well-known games ever made, Pac-Man. So what can I say about one of the most talked about games in existence that other people haven't said? Well, I'll give it a shot, but chances are other people have said the same thing. Well, on its exterior, it's deceptively simple. You are put in a maze filled with Pac Dots, Power Pellets, and Ghosts. The goal of the game is to eat every Pac Dot on the screen before moving on to the next one. So yeah, that sounds pretty basic. The thing though is that it isn't. There's actually a lot of complexity. The ghosts have their own individual personalities that reflect their AI patterns. As a result of this, you'll find yourself being trapped by them pretty quickly. The goal is to not to let that happen. Thankfully, when you eat a Power Pellet, the power dynamic is reversed. Now Pac-Man can eat the ghosts. However, upon doing this, the ghosts will go back to the ghost zone and will be able to hunt you down again regardless of whether or not the Power Pellet's effects have worn off. So, you want to use the Power Pellets in a very strategic manner. In fact, a lot of the game is based on strategy. Just in the manner one eats off the Pac Dots requires at least some strategy because you don't want to leave spare dots in empty spaces, but you also don't want to be killed by the ghosts. And as the game goes on, things will get more and more intense. That's the beauty of this game. It's the perfect blend of simplicity and complexity. It's simple to pick up and play, the graphics and sound are very simple, but the game itself is very complex. It's one of those games that will never age, and it's not hard to see why. Number 9. Portal. Here's another very highly praised one. Everyone goes nuts for this game, and the game deserves it. It's a complete triumph of level design. The whole game is about mastering this portal gun and just what you can do with it. As the game progresses, the application of said tool becomes much more intricate. You know what? Kudos to Valve for making such a focused game. It's not the portal mechanics themselves that make the game a marvel, it's how they're used, and they're used so undeniably well that it's hard not to be impressed by it. I also find it really clever that the game takes place in a testing facility, and that really sets the tone for what you're doing in the game. I really have nothing else to say about it, it's just a very focused and fully realized game. Number 8. Gianna's Sister's Twisted Dreams. In order to talk about why this game is so good, I have to start from the beginning. Gianna's Sister's Twisted Dreams is a 2D side-scroller released by Black Forest Games on PCs in 2012 and on the Xbox 360 and PS3 in 2013. There are also plans for a Wii U version, but I think it's time to move on. It's a sequel to one of the most infamous Mario ripoffs ever to hit the market, not to mention one of the most collectible and sought after. So how do you take a clone of another game and make it original? Simple, you do this. Essentially, Gianna can switch between her 2 forms with the touch of a button, and with it the entire world changes. Is it a superficial aesthetic change, or does such an action impact the game in a strong manner? Well, if it was the former, it wouldn't be on this list. As I stated before, Gianna has 2 forms, Cute Gianna and Punk Gianna, each of which has an exclusive set of skills. Both can walk around, jump, and perform other basic tasks. However, Cute Gianna has a twirling ability, and Punk Gianna can turn into a flame and roar across the screen, taking out enemies. You're going to encounter several things in the world that will require application of at least one of those actions, and as the game progresses, said applications get far more frequent as you'll be put in very intense situations where you can change the variables around by switching forms. This game demonstrates very well that it's not just about the game mechanics that you have, it's about how you make use of them that makes a game strong. And not only does this game do that well, it does it tremendously well. In addition, the graphics and music support this interaction very well as they change along with the character. Overall, this is a very focused and artistically strong game. Black Forest Games, I look forward to your projects in the future. Number 7. Oh, this is a good one. Lotus Turbo Challenge 2 for the Commodore Amiga. On its surface, it looks like an average outrun-style racing game. You're in a sports car being timed to get to the next checkpoint within the specified time limit. Get through all of the checkpoints and you win. However, how the game mechanics are implemented and the level design should really be admired. This game does everything in its power to make getting to that checkpoint as difficult as possible, and it will make a nervous wreck out of you. For starters, you want to maintain the highest speed possible so you can make the checkpoints. This means don't crash into anything. The road is filled with obstacles and surfaces that will slow you down, and these things will only get more prominent as the game progresses. With each environment you're in, there's going to be another obstacle or surface to avoid, so you want to keep your eyes on the road at all times. In addition, the turns get really tight, and if you don't watch your speed when making these turns, you're going to crash, and you'll have to build up your momentum again. Then there's the timer itself. This thing is incredibly sadistic. It knows just how long it takes to get to that checkpoint with a perfect run, and it's not going to give you too much extra time. Getting to that finish line is one of the tensest moments I've ever experienced in a video game. When you do make that finish line, the sense of accomplishment is overwhelming. Even on the first level, I was completely and utterly speechless for minutes on end. And it's not the graphics or music that creates that sense of awe, it's the game itself. Number 6. You knew at least one of the two was coming. Super Mario 64 and Super Mario Sunshine. I include the two of these games as one entity in this slot because they have the same overall artistic goal, and each one of the two has their own exclusive strength that helps it achieve that goal, and an area where the other one is stronger, so I think they balance out when looked at together. For a long time, Shigeru Miyamoto had this interactive garden concept, where the player would just explore an open environment and interact with said environment. Initially, he tried to do this with the Super FX chip on the Super Nintendo, but the project was moved to the Nintendo 64. With the popularization of 3D gameplay, this would be the perfect time to bring his dream to life. Super Mario 64 is the very realization of that concept. The levels are set up like individual gardens, if you will, and the hub world connecting the stages together is like one of these gardens in of itself. That's actually pretty ingenious. The levels are more so based off of various interactions than platforming, and the game is set up a lot differently than the Mario games preceding it. So much so that I don't really think of it as Mario 64, but more so Shigeru Miyamoto's Interactive Garden 64 starring Mario. So I've established I think the game is very impressive, so what's the problem with it? Well, you're not interacting with the environments as much as you are with various objects on those environments. That and the game kind of gives you everything to play with within the first half hour or so. I feel that it'd be stronger if the environments themselves were more malleable and more diverse, and the interactions were not only paced out more gradually, but also built off of each other and became more complex as the game progresses. That's very much what Super Mario Sunshine does. This is where Sunshine excels as a great game. The environments are more diverse. You do interact with the environments themselves more often. The interactions with the environments build off of each other and placed out more gradually. So if all of this is the case, then why is it tied with 64 here? Well, these interactions don't feel as direct in a way. It feels like you're interacting with Flood, who is interacting with the environment. So while I feel both games are great, they do kind of balance it out between strengths and weaknesses. Number 5. Lair. Yeah, you know how I've talked a lot about how unbelievably underrated this game is? Well, this should give you some perspective as to just how much I meant that. While I'm not sure as to whether or not I'd actually call it a masterpiece, Lair is at the very least a very artistically strong game. The game really gives you the sensation that you're part of a huge battle but have a lot of control over what's going on, and by executing a good strategy, you can put order to that chaos and come out victorious. This game is very heavy on the strategy, and I think that's one of the reasons as to why so many people hated it. The game establishes what you ultimately need to accomplish, but you actually have to evaluate your surroundings and develop strategies in order to succeed in reaching that goal. It's not just about shooting things. You actually have to be attentive and use your brain. When you deconstruct the reviews and other comments about the game, this is where their issue stands. The control issue, if you could call it that, is merely a straw man argument. The controls are actually excellent. Yes, you heard me. These are actually some of the best motion controls I have seen in a game. You have a lot of control over your dragon, and when I say that, I mean that not only are the controls good, but you can do a heck of a lot with this dragon. You have control over the speed, how sharp you turn, whether or not the dragon is on land, the altitude in the air, how fast you fire, and etc. In addition, you have maneuvers like the 180, the dash, and even dodge. You can also move the camera freely, which allows you to lock onto enemies behind you, under you, over you, to the side, and anywhere in between. The key word is control. This element also ties into the strategy. You have a lot of options as to how you can attack an enemy or complete a certain objective. Which way is the most efficient for this given scenario? You're going to be asking yourself a lot on so many different levels. On terms of the objectives you're given, prioritizing between those objectives when you're given more than one, how to take down individual enemies, and even motivating your troops. Yes, you can also affect the tide of battle by motivating your troops through performing certain actions like wiping out the front lines. As a result of all these choices, the scale of this game is massive. The visuals reflect this very well, and the music? Oh my god. The reason why I'm a little hesitant to call it a masterpiece is while the game is fully realized, it does actually have a couple of problems. While steering the dragon works brilliantly with the 6-axis, some of the special moves like the dash and 180 take a couple of minutes to master. Thankfully, when you update the game, they move the major ones to the D-pad, and in addition, you don't really have to use said special moves that often, so it's not like the problems weren't addressed, and they weren't too big to begin with. Aside from that, I really have nothing bad to say about it. It's absolutely fantastic. Number 4. I'm not going to lie, I'm not the biggest fan of Metroid. I don't hate the series, but I don't really have an intense love for it like I do some other game series. I'd also be lying if I said that Metroid Prime is my favorite exclusive on the GameCube. However, looking at it objectively, I have to say that not only is it really damn good, but it's also the best GameCube exclusive I have played as of yet. Like the other games in the series, the focus is on exploring every nook and cranny of uncharted regions, therefore making the unfamiliar familiar to you. So what makes this particularly stronger than the other games in the series? For one thing, not only does this game make the transition to 3D well, but it uses the 3D to its advantage, and said application propels it closer to that goal the game is already trying to achieve. The world you're in feels more alive and natural than the Metroid titles preceding it. Here the tone isn't just set by the visuals and music, but the level design itself. We get more wide open spaces instead of just a series of linear tunnels linked in a non-linear fashion like you see in the 2D Metroid games. It also helps that the game isn't totally in your face about it. It keeps the focus where it should be, on the gameplay and teaching the player what they need to do in order to progress. Also, the environment isn't just something you're looking at. You're interacting with and examining the life around you. So while this game has the same goal that the other games in the series have before, it reaches it far more effectively. I haven't played Metroid Prime 2 or 3 at the time of making this video. However, I'm definitely looking forward to doing so. Okay, so we've covered Super Mario 64 and Sunshine, and there's one more 3D platformer left on this list. That's right, a 3D platformer better than Mario 64. Well, what is it? Is it Super Mario Galaxy? No, though on a subjective standpoint, it's one of my favorites in the genre. Is it Banjo-Kazooie? No, not that either. Sonic Adventure 2? Nope. Then what is it? Yep, it's Pac-Man World 2. Yeah, weren't expecting that now, were you? So what makes this game so unbelievably good? A lot, actually. For starters, this game has, without a doubt, the best platforming I've seen in a 3D platformer. And there's a lot of contributing factors as to why. The platform placement alone is top-notch. I mean, about as close to perfect as you can get. Not to mention, there are several different kinds of platforms and most of them are very environment-based. So with every new level, you'll come across new hazards to avoid, and different gameplay mechanics being added to what you're already used to by that point. In addition, the interactions build off of each other, so by the end of the game you'll be a lot more active than you were at the beginning of the game, and Pac-Man can do a heck of a lot in this game. He can not only run, jump, and eat, but also fly through the air, ice skate, swim, get into a submarine tank and shoot things, and rollerblade. Even with all this variety, there is a sense of consistency. There will be things that you'll be doing constantly throughout the game, while also experiencing something different to keep things fresh. Then there's the art direction. It's not just pretty to look at, but it also plays a big part in giving your interactions an extra sense of depth. Just by how everything is scaled and shaped, it makes the hazards you're jumping over feel all the more real and dangerous, and when you're constantly in danger of ending up in said hazard, it really enhances the game. Heck, even the animation on Pac-Man and some of his facial expressions contribute to this. You really get the sense of being airborne when you jump, so with that mixed with the sense of danger provided by the art direction as well as the different surfaces and platforms you'll be interacting with, results in some of the most exhilarating and rewarding platforming I have ever seen. Then there's the music. Oh, the music in this game, it's incredible. Each world has a theme, and the other levels of the same world will take said theme and expand off of it, building off of it like the game is building off of itself. The melodies always fit what you're doing and really help your interactions in the game feel much more real. With all that together, you've got one heck of a good game. So overall, while the goal of the game is very basic, it's really just trying to be the best damn platform game it can be, but it's done so unbelievably well and done so artistically that it's hard not to be impressed by it. What else can I say? It's simply one of the greats. Number 2. Turpin 2 The Final Fight is one of the games I've talked about the most, so I'm going to try to keep this as brief as I can while saying enough to represent the game as well as I can and bring up some things that I haven't addressed about the game before. Turpin 2's artistic goal is to make the player feel like they're exploring and progressing through a huge world. Not only does this game do that well, but it does it so well it continues to blow my mind playthrough after playthrough after playthrough. Let's start with the title screen. This has to be the best title screen I have ever seen in any game. You know how a lot of people praise Mega Man X for teaching the player how to do the essentials before making said application of them? Well, this game actually does it even better. You haven't even touched one button, and already you have seen the basics. How you make application of the basics is left for you to experiment with, and you're going to learn very quickly that using the environments to your advantage is what you're going to want to do. So already, the environment has a big role in the game. In addition, the exploration is done tremendously well. The game actively rewards you for venturing out into the unknown. Often by examining the layout of the level, you can tell what path is the main path and which one is a detour. But if you take the detour first, you'll probably be better off and have a stronger chance against the machine and his forces. So we got how big the environment plays in the game and the exploration element. However, what is this about progression? Well, each level starts exactly where the last one left off. There isn't one point in the game where you ask yourself, how did I get here? And the environments smoothly transition into one another. For example, in the first level you're in the desert. In the next level, you're running through these man-made ruins on the desert. By the end of the second level, you're descending further and further and further. In the first level of the second world, you're in an underground cavern completely overtaken by nature. It also helps that, much like Pac-Man World 2, you're going to be doing a lot in this game. The variety is incredible, but never feels unnatural or out of place. It all blends together and flows shockingly well. You really get the sense that this is one big cohesive world with a lot to interact with in it. The graphics are also integrated well and help the game achieve its overall goal. The levels don't just take one tone and stick with it. There are caves to explore in the desert, there's a flooded section of the underground cavern that you swim through, and the list goes on. This really helps give the world you're in a lot more depth and really makes it more believable, but it doesn't shove it into your face either. Then of course it's time to address the elephant in the room that needs to be mentioned: the soundtrack. This is by far the best composed, most well thought out soundtrack I have ever heard in any game. The melodies and the structure of the songs get so complex and so intricate, it's just incredible. There were points where I felt like the song was just going to stop and loop, but then it took the song into a completely different direction. It's just mind-blowing. In addition, they fit the stages unbelievably well. For example, in the first spaceship stage, the music is really conveying the sense of newfound freedom, and it works together so well. It has left me speechless on numerous occasions. So with a game this good, the most shocking thing I'm going to address is that this is only number 2 on the list. Number 1. The game listed under number 1 is a curious case, as it is both the best game I have played and my favorite game. And the reason why it's the latter is oddly unconventional. My favorite genre is the 3D platformer, but this isn't one at all. In fact, this game kind of creates its own little genre in of itself. It's not a game I'm particularly nostalgic for. Heck, it's not even on one of my favorite consoles. This isn't the game I've personally had the most fun with, but more so the game that has impressed me the most and has only gotten better and better as I've looked into it more and more. It's more so out of immense respect and admiration than superficial appeal. So with that, the number 1 artistic game I've ever played is Star Wars Rogue Squadron for the Nintendo 64. So what makes this game so good? A lot of you are probably thinking to yourself, I don't remember it being particularly that exciting. Why is this number 1 with games like Super Mario 64, Metroid Prime, and Portal in the lineup? Well, not only does this game have a great artistic goal, but it goes out of its way to get there on every solitary conceivable level, and it succeeds unbelievably. That's probably the best word I could use to describe this game. Unbelievable. So, what does this game try to do? What is this artistic goal? Well, the game does everything in its power to immerse the player and make him or her feel like they're in Luke Skywalker's shoes, going on these missions. This game does that so well, but it does it through very subtle means. This isn't an over-the-top action-filled explosion fest, but more so a thinker's game. Let's start with the menus. Yes, you heard me right. Even the menus play a part in helping the game achieve its goal. The level select menu is the mission briefing room on the Home 1 cruiser. You're briefed there like a soldier in this universe would be. You're told your objectives, but you're also given background to how the scenario happened in the first place, and how completing said objectives will impact the Rebel Alliance, the civilizations on the planet, and even nearby systems sometimes. Already that's pretty immersive, but also the graphics and sound set the tone beautifully. You really get the sense that you're in that room.
The cowardly Imperial governor is looting the city, using his luxury yachts to transport stolen goods. Help the citizens of Gerard 5 keep their rightful treasures and stop the Empire in its tracks.
The same could be said about the hangar bay, or as others would call it, the ship selection screen. Not only do the graphics and sound give you the sense that you're in that room, but you're also given really detailed descriptions about how the ships work, all the way down to part manufacturers. Not only is this every Star Wars geek's wet dream, but this also introduces an important gameplay element. Each ship has its strengths and weaknesses, and depending on your objectives, you're going to want to use a certain craft that would be the most efficient for the job. Each ship also has special abilities, like differences between fire rates, boost power, ability to close the S-foils, and there's even upgrades for your ships that make them more powerful. Not to mention, you're awarded medals depending on how well you did on a mission, and getting a higher rank will allow you to unlock more of the ships. Speaking of the gameplay, this is how it works. You're assigned an objective, you complete that objective, but sometimes things don't always go as planned, so you'll be given another objective in response. That sounds simple enough, but what makes it interesting is that it doesn't force you to follow that objective 100% of the time. You are free to explore the worlds you're visiting, and it can be pretty interesting to see how the civilizations work, or even just getting a sense of what these worlds are like. Not to mention, you can sometimes find the upgrades I was talking about earlier, so you're rewarded for doing this to an extent. You want to keep the objectives priority 1, which introduces one of the main reasons why this game works: strategy. Like Lair, this game requires you to observe what's going on around you and think about how exactly you're going to respond to it, and what exactly you should take into higher priority. Yeah, if you couldn't tell, despite the two games having different artistic goals, they're really similar in many ways. Even down to that weird but awesome flying Buick code, but you've heard me talk enough about that game, so let's move on. There's a lot of information that you need to process, and after a while you'll really be able to get a better understanding of what exactly is going on. I mean, you'll be able to pinpoint incoming enemy fighters before they even come on screen, just based on the formations and behavior patterns you can observe on the radar. In addition, a lot of the time, you don't just end up right at the battle. You have to find the site, and the approach segments really do add a lot to the game. You really get this feeling of uncertainty, not sure of how the battle will turn out, and it also allows you to gain an understanding of what kind of road you're on. Another thing that helps is that the soundtrack is completely interactive, and will change judging by what kind of situation you are in. And while this may not be Chris Hulsbeck's best soundtrack, the songs really do the job and set the mood. The story, and especially the way it's implemented, are absolute genius, and yes, even they help the game achieve its goal. To keep things brief, renowned Imperial TIE Interceptor pilot Kason Moore is captured by the Rebel Alliance. She says that she wants to defect and will supply the rebels with information regarding various Imperial installations. The rebels agree but are suspicious of Kason, unaware of her true intentions, so they keep their eyes peeled. So what, does she become the bad guy? No! It turns out that her intentions are genuine and wants to help the rebels because of what the Empire did to Alderaan, her home planet. It hurts her to pull through with it sometimes, but she will help the Alliance in any way she can.
That's all for the Imperial forces.
Form up, team. Let's get back to the ship. Nice work, Kasten.
It feels strange, though, being on the other side. I took their orders for a long time.
I, for one, am glad you're here. You're fighting for your own ideals now.
Yes.
After some time has passed, a new foe surfaces. Kasten's old mentor, Moff Cole Searden. He is obsessed with Rogue Squadron and has studied their tactics very carefully. His plan is to wipe out the rebels back to supplies. Doing this will render their medical supplies useless. This way, the Alliance will die a slow and painful death. That's where you intervene. What I love about this story is that it puts Luke into an observer role a lot of the time, much like the player inevitably is. But ultimately, he's the one to intervene and save the day. Again, much like the player. The story alone puts you in his shoes, but to make things even more immersive, a lot of these plot points are conveyed very subtly, and are very much in the background, often brought up during casual conversation in-game.
Private channel, sir. Private channel, go ahead. Luke, how do we know Kasten isn't leading us right into a trap? Not now, Wedge.
So in the end, the game is doing everything in its power to put you in Luke Skywalker's shoes, and succeeds fantastically. Not through over-the-top imagery and big explosions, but by giving the gameplay a lot of depth, tying that into the visuals, music, and story, as well as a lot of subtle elements that really pay off in the end. This is one of the few games where I've gotten so engrossed that I forgot I was even playing a game. And it's not because of superficial appeal, but more so the game putting me into a role that requires me to think a lot about what's going on and how to respond to it. If you have any games that you think are stronger, or at least strong games, feel free to let me know. I'd especially love to hear explanations as to why, so I can get a better understanding. I just feel like talking about what I view to be some of the best games of all time. And regardless of whether or not you agree with me, I thank you immensely for watching. fm2, signing out.